We are now recording in progress. Excellent. So the way we'll try to do things today, we got a lot of questions that came in from everyone who registered. So we're going to try to get through as many of those questions as we can. We will try to answer questions. If you want to throw it in the chat or raise your hand, I will try to keep a watch out as well to see and try to get those questions answered and get as much information as possible. I know we have some other people here. If you want to chime in with your own experiences too, as if you've done renovations yourself, feel free, because the more information, the better for everyone that's here. It's how we kind of do things. Like we share information, share our stories, as we do as librarians, right? So with that, I'm going to turn it over to run our questions to another member of the Member Services Committee, Maria. So thank you, Maria. I will stop talking and let Maria take it from here.
Hi,
Thank you.
everyone. Thank you so much for being here. I'm Maria Worth. I'm the Assistant Director of the Cliffside Park Public Library, and I'm also part of the Member Services Committee. Thank you to our three panelists for joining us. We couldn't do this without you. And we also have some attendees as well that registered to be a part of our group that have also gone through renovation. So they'll chime in with some of their input as well. We're going to keep this pretty casual. We're going to go through some of the main questions that were posed when you guys signed up for this virtual chat, and then we'll go through the questions that were posed to us in advance from our registrants. We'll try and answer them. If our panelists feel that they have expertise in that type of question to be able to answer it for you, they will. They'll give their perspective as best as possible. And we're fortunate enough that they're also willing to help out, with follow-up questions if we have any follow-up questions for those that are either currently in renovations or looking to do renovations in their library. So we're going to just get right into it, keep it casual, keep this pretty much a Q&A type of chat for today. So one of the main questions to our panelists is, what is the actual process of moving the collections and all of the items from your building? How do we go about that in regards to, do you need bids? Do you need three vendors? What vendors have you used? Do we have it? Do you find one company that will move, store, get rid of, all that? So it's a general question, but it's a big one. So if anyone would like to jump in on that, that would be great. Any of our panelists.
So I'm gonna go first. um, I I reached out to several directors before deciding what to do with moving collections, and I heard several smaller size library staff moved, but our collection size is pretty big, so we decided to hire professional movers. And I think I reached out several vendors on the State Library. There's a website that recommended architect movers, so I reached out several there. One vendor came out to give us some sort of general idea how much it's going to cost, and then based on that estimate, our purchasing department recommended we have to go out for a public bidding process. So we put out the bid for library moving storage, and then the company who gave us estimates got awarded. So it worked out really well. So they came here. Um, they were very professional. They are specialized in libraries. It's called Clancy Moving. They are moving a lot of universities, libraries, public libraries, school libraries. So we hired them. We didn't have to tell them anything. They are already familiar with the library classification systems. So they had their system, and they packed it up. We were debating we were going to be able to fit everything because we were renovating, but our meeting room was not being renovated. It was excluded from our scope of work. So we decided to put all our collection boxes in our auditorium space. So we kept it on site. They initially suggested if you cannot fit everything, they have also off-site storage options that's climate controlled. Um, but that gets more expensive if you store your collection off-site. But we were able to fit everything in our auditorium, and we were able to save a little bit by doing that. And they were very good. They packed our collection less than 4 days. and it was very efficient. My department, my staff members were kind of overseeing what they were doing, but basically they knew what they were doing. So we were pretty lucky with our vendor. Uh, Before we were packing up everything, we were already closed, but staff earlier that year, we got rid of our music CD collections. We read it a lot. So we were trying to minimize the number of items that we were going to put it in storage. And then anything that was new, it was not going to be new anymore by the time we reopened. So we started changing all the new collections into and integrated it into our regular collection. That's what we did.
I have
Thank
a
you.
quick
That was a
follow-up
very
for you.
concise. That was a very concise answer. Thank you so much.
I have
I
just a quick follow-up for you, Shinae, actually. And was there a Buckles element too, in terms of Buckles probably had to help you take the collection offline? Is that correct? So that it wouldn't be accessible?
Correct. I set up a meeting with Buckle staff maybe 2 months before. So we closed right after Labor Day, and then the meeting was probably early July or at the end of June to go over the timelines to close your operation. So the Buckles remotely did the bulk change of our collection to be in storage.
Just adding on to Shanae, I think what you said was, yeah, pretty much what we did as well. I guess ours was a little bit of on a larger scale and a little bit more complicated because we have two locations in Maplewood, and we closed one location in 2021. And that's our main library to get ready for construction. And we had the best laid plans of, we did a ton of weeding that year to get it ready being for all the materials to get boxed and moved. And then Hurricane Ida hit, and we had over 6 feet of water in our basement. And had to shut down all the electricity in the building. And so we had to move out under terrible conditions in the building. So we had to move very quickly. So when our movers came, we had to put over 60,000 items they had to move over 60,000 items out and and we had to use a storage facility. And we did not reopen the main library until, July of 2025. So we had items in storage for, close to 4 years. And that's, I guess, if I had to do it again, you're talking about uh, like doing it over again. If we had known we would be closed and under construction for that long, we would not have put that many materials in storage because, things change, I remember at the time one of our trustees saying, she said, we're going to pay a lot to move and store the materials. Why don't we just buy all new materials when we open? And I thought that was absolutely insane at the time, but it might have worked, So it is something that you have to be very thoughtful about. Like, when you're moving all those collections 3 or 4 years from now, if it does take that long, is this what our community is going to want? Um, and then when we reopened and moved all the boxes back, and we were excited to see so many things, but because we had built up a collection, while we were closed and we had interim locations, we had to do a lot of weeding before we reopened. And thankfully, our moving company, who we hired on state contract, so that was helpful, so that we didn't have to go into the public bidding process. They were able to remove books that we did not, that we could no longer house in the library. And that would have been a public relations nightmare for us if we had to put books, if we were doing this more publicly, having to get books off site and people had, could see that. We were able to do all of that pretty kind of systematically before we reopened to the public. So it was a lot more complicated than what I'm saying right now, but I think it's a process. And the other thing that we did was we hired a move management consultant because our process was so complicated, and she was instrumental in keeping us on track and helping us through the process.
Thank you so much, Sarah, for that perspective. Elise, do you have anything you want to throw in on here?
So we took a completely different route than Shinae and Sarah. Excuse me. We kept everything in-house. We did a major weed and did our best to relocate collections mostly to the second floor, but we also transformed our programming space, our meeting room, into where we would have our new items as well as like circulation functions, because our circulation area and our whole pretty much as soon as you walk in from the foyer um, under renovation was under renovation. So we also did a big weed and decided to get rid of our music CD collection. But we basically did a big weed throughout the whole building and tried to condense our collection, which it was overdue for anyway. So it worked out and kept everything in house.
Thank you so much for that. We appreciate all your feedback on that.
Maria, can I just one more thing just to echo Shanae? Buckles was incredibly helpful. You know, what you said, we met with them, you know, way before all of this happened. They guided us on how to make the collections unaccessible. Like we were moving collections into our branch, we were moving to our interim location, and they were incredibly helpful.
Wonderful. Wonderful.
I want to add one thing to the Sarah's collection got damaged. We actually, at the end of our renovation, our auditorium that where we were storing our boxes were flooded. We got water in it. So multiple boxes got water damaged. We ended up waiting, not opening right away because it was messing up their order of the way they stacked the boxes in certain orders. And by the time we opened it, it was dried up, but we had a mold damage on some of our books, and we had to file an insurance claim and count all the number of books that got damaged. So just keep in mind when you're storing in-house, you have to know your building.
Good point. Very good point. And also, Sarah, a very good point that you made in regards to depending on how long your renovation may or may not take, what will be relevant. So the common theme to all of your answers to me was weed, weed, weed. So thank you. You answered part of the next question, which was, did you get off-site storage? So some of you said yes, some of you said no. And the companies, did you move collections, shelves, furniture? So you did hit upon some of that, but if we could just quickly just say these moving companies, you talked about the collections, but what about all of the other items in your building? If you are doing a renovation that requires a complete knockdown, or even if it isn't, is that an opportunity for you to get rid of furniture, buy new? Is it worth keeping? So if you could just hit on that quickly.
We were getting we had to get everything out of the building because it was being torn down. And because we had the flood, I forget what they're called, the big company that comes in when there's remediation needed, they actually took all of the stuff out of the building. So that was, in some ways very helpful, but it was in an emergency situation because we had a huge flood in the building. But we were planning to have, we were going to do the public auction to get rid of all of the furniture in the building because we weren't reusing it. We did move some of our furniture into our branch location and into our interim services location. And our, DPW within our township was very helpful in that part of it. But, we were told we couldn't just get rid of our furniture. It had to go through the public bidding process, which is, also requires a lot of time if you're going to do it properly.
Right. Elise or Shinae?
For my library, collection was moved by moving company. The shelves and furnitures and other stuff, we're not going to reuse it. So that was part of the contractor's scope of work. Part of their demo part, they had to remove and put everything away. So the contractor handled removing all the furniture and putting down the shelves for us.
Shinae,
Because
quick follow-up.
we, or oh, sorry,
No,
because
I
we
was just going to say, did you have to go through the public bidding process and that kind of thing, or insurance like numbers for any of those items?
Well, for us, contractor went through the bidding process and they're removing all the other work, like the other stuff inside the library was part of their demolition work. So we did not go through a separate bidding process for this.
Very helpful. Alicia, I think you were going to say something on that real quick.
Yes, yeah, because we kept all of our collections within the library. We did a big weed throughout the whole building, but we also again removed some furniture, both floors, even where the renovations weren't necessarily happening, to try and make more space and use the spaces that we had efficiently. We tried to save some of the good shelving that was still in the space, more so the actual shelves themselves that hadn't been bent and such like that, so we
Right.
could replace in some other areas in the interim until we eventually get to those parts of the renovation. And we actually also, our maintenance person repurposed a lot of the shelving too as well for storage areas, which was super helpful because we didn't really um, have shelving back there, and it definitely was a big help. So we were a bit creative, but for the most part, it was also part of the scope of work that the furniture and such was removed and uh, thrown out. And then we also did have some of our comfy chairs were adopted by a school library nearby as well. So we
Some
were able
donations
to,
as well.
yeah,
Okay,
upcycle.
great. I'm going to take a little spin and change this a little bit. So that was the main, like that's a big gist of an overall picture on how we get started with the project. But I think in a renovation, if you're a director or an assistant director, one of your biggest uh, concerns is and should be your staff. And we obviously want to make sure that our staff not only keeps their job and isn't furloughed. So how did you ladies manage your current staff schedules? Either if you were in a much smaller temporary location, or if you had a branch location, or if you were working within your space, but with, you know, a fraction of your collection. How did you justify it? Where did you fit everyone? And how did you keep the morale positive for your staff?
I can start. So we're a union shop, so we are committed to, to our staff, to our full staff through this process. And we found an interim location, small, that our township was part of the township, and so we didn't have to pay for our interim location. And it had a very small public area, but it had a large area for staff. So there was room for all of the staff to go. We also converted our branch library into a library specifically for children's and teens. So we had full children's and teen services while we were closed, and then a very small adult collection in our interim spot. I think what happened, and I think what generally it seems like this happens, a lot when you close for a renovation project, it gives an opportunity for some staff who've, are thinking about retirement or, kind of in, or maybe looking for other positions, like because they don't want to deal with this. We did have, a fair number of staff who retired right before we closed for construction. Um, but we really like expanded our outreach opportunities. We thought creatively about what we could do while we were closed to keep providing, really, good services in Maplewood. So that's, we made it, we're, the staff is our most important resource, and so that was a commitment of mine. It was incredibly challenging. And I would say if you talk to some of my staff, they would say it was really, really hard, being in tight spaces and, keeping morale up. But I give a lot of credit to the staff because they hung in there, and I think our public really appreciated it. So we didn't have that extra stress of the public saying, why are you spending this money on the staff or whatever? And I think maybe that's just lucky for us in Maplewood. But there was a real commitment to keep things going while we were closed for construction.
Thank you.
Well, same thing happened to us. We had a lot of retirements before renovation and during renovation. So we downsized our staff a lot. And I eventually started calling out maybe 5 months before we closed. I started calling out different libraries around our area to see if they want to have our staff member working at their library. So and I look at, my staff members, where they live, and then trying to be considerate of their commute, and then assigned some staff members at each library. And then our temporary location was in Milford Library. Their building is a good size building, so they were able to accommodate most of my staff members there. And we continued our children's programs and helping our patrons there. So we were lucky in that way because we had several retirement parties while we were closed. That was a time for us to get together and kind of see each other and get excited to check on things, what's going on, and how other libraries are doing. So it was kind of an interesting time, I have to say.
Thank you.
We were only closed to the public for a total of like 3 weeks during our this phase of the renovations. And what we did was I encouraged my staff to go and visit other libraries and to do more outreach and site visits because many of my staff, they're kind of busy with their job responsibilities and don't get that time to get to step away and see what other libraries are doing. So all of my staff members went and saw at least 3 other libraries during the closure and got some great perspective and were able to see what other libraries nearby were doing. We also had professional development and we had some staff bonding and some trainings and such like that. But I think that was the highlight for my staff during the closures was getting out and getting to see what other people are doing.
I love it. Thank you so much. And I think this is a great panel because we have one very long-term big project, then a middle project, and then a smaller one. And I do see common themes, even though your size of your project and your length of your project is different. So that's really a helpful perspective. So thank you.
Maria, real quick.
Yeah, please.
Sorry. There is one question in the chat that goes back to a previous, if you don't mind going over that one.
Yes. Yep. I see it popping up now, just now. Thank you.
Sorry.
No. Excellent. Thank you so much. Can you please discuss moving back into the building and if your movers or a vendor reshelved the collection for you? Great question.
For us, yes. Our initial bidding process included packing everything, storage, and then unpacking and putting back to the new location, new space, I have to say. The good thing about this mover that we hired is they count the number of shelves that we're gonna have it with the new shelving, and then kind of decide how many boxes we have in that collection, and then they decide like you fill in 70% or 60%, they were able to calculate that for us. So it was wonderful for us.
So your movers, not a separate vendor, the movers that did the initial
mover
mover.
did it. Yep.
And they reshelved it based on what you decided together would go back onto your shelves?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, fantastic.
So again, ours was complicated because we were closed for so long. So our movers and we honestly panicked with the number of books that were coming back into the library. I mean, that was a moment when we went to the moving facility and saw the number of boxes and we're just picturing them in the building and in the space. It was a moment of panic before we kind of got our heads together. And we had them move the boxes to to the shelving area. So like, whatever, it was 800 through 820, that box would be on the floor right by it. So that's what we did. then we got a crew of about 60 volunteers. So before that, we knew that staff wouldn't be able to handle all this. So we held a public meeting, and people were very excited to be in the to have the opportunity to get in the library before we opened. So we got a crew, had a public meeting, got a crew of great volunteers that could actually help us. So we had staff members assigned to the librarians that were assigned to those specific collection areas were in charge of their specific collection areas and then helped the volunteers get things on the shelf. So the library staff did the first pass of getting books out of the boxes onto the carts, doing the weeding, because we had to do a lot of weeding, getting the books out of there that we didn't want to put on the shelves. And then our volunteers were incredible about getting the books on the shelves and had to do a lot of shifting. We tried not to have shifting, have to happen, but I mean, it was inevitable just because, it wasn't as precise as what we wanted it to be. But it was a real community effort. And I think they liked actually being part of that behind the scenes and helping us get ready.
It's a very unique perspective for sure, because it gives them a little skin in the game too. They've been closed for so long in your case, and for them to be able to, as the public, to come in and help reopen their library, you feel some pride in that. So that was a really unique way of getting the help that you needed. So, great. If anyone else that's in our group has questions, please feel free to add to the chat. Matt, thank you for catching that for me. So along with the staff scheduling, how did you adjust your programming for the public in a smaller scale space without a formal meeting room per se for some of you? Because it sounds like some of you use your meeting room for storage, collection. And then Shinae, I think you said that you were able to use New Milford's space to continue some of your programming. But then, like Sarah, you said that adult was super small, but you were able to keep children's and teens. So it'd be interesting to hear, how do you keep the most popular things that are in your library, and typically a lot of it has to do with programming, how do you keep that alive during a renovation process?
Yeah, for Franklin Lakes, because we only have the one programming space and we were using that for circulation, we didn't really have much space either. We were able to have some smaller scale crafts and such on the second floor, but we reached out to our town, and around the corner from us are an ambulance corps building and an OEM building, and they were incredibly cooperative with us and letting us use their spaces for programming, because we wouldn't really be able to do children's programming that involves a lot of movement and such like that, like in the stacks on the second floor. So town cooperation was super helpful, and we did a lot more take and make crafts and such like during this time. But we're really excited to get back into our normal scheduled programs. So.
And I would say very similarly in Maplewood, our town was very cooperative. We used, we have an annual ideas festival that brings in a lot of people, and it actually just starting for us this year. So we're back in our building for the first time doing this. But we had to use town spaces, to do these big events. And just having that cooperation with the town, I second what Elise said, is crucial. And I neglected to say earlier that Milburn actually had housed one of our staff members for over a year. And so that was also, so thank you, and our surrounding libraries were incredibly helpful during our closure.
For us, our teen programs, children's programs were offered at New Milford Library, our temporary location. We offered for adults virtual craft programs. So there are people who registered for the program, picked up all the supplies in advance. They met virtually for the programs. For lecture programs for adults, we did the program in the township building where the council have their meetings, council chambers. So we booked their meeting room every other Fridays. That's how we offered program. I think it generally worked well. I wanted to offer something for the community, and we did a lot of outreach. We went to farmers market every month, every week, and we did a school visit, school events, participation. So I think our staff went to different locations.
Great, thank you. So a lot of outreach really was more the way you presented your, other than virtual things, the outreach was the way that you got the programming into the community as best as possible by going to them instead of them coming to a programming space. Obviously, you use a town as well for certain programs, but okay, great. Are there any pointers on how to think futuristically, like with regards to what a new library will need? So smaller renovations, this may not be as big if you're doing a small conference room or an addition, but in a bigger setting, or perhaps it does, and I'd love to hear that from Elise, who may have a smaller project. But if you're doing some sort of bigger project and you don't know how long you're going to be closed, how do you think for the future what your library will need? Not in regards to just programming, but furniture or equipment or layout, or if I'm back in a space in 3, 4, 5 years from now, not only is my collection not going to be the same, like we just discussed, and oh my God, you're overwhelmed with a major weeding situation, but also what is it that we're looking to, we have to think ahead to say, what will the library look like 5 years from now, not only with our collection, but with everything within it?
Well, I would say, the planning is incredibly important, and being very thoughtful in how you're planning. That included for us, and this was, because we received and applied for one of the state grants and received it. That was actually very helpful to us because that forced us, to do a very detailed building program before we even started, to really be very thoughtful about what we were doing. But I think the main thing is that, it's like building with flexibility in mind and really thinking through that for everything, and so like most of our shelving is on wheels. Our spaces, whoever comes after me may say that, what was this crazy person doing? This is absolutely insane, and want to change things, so all of our spaces have that in mind so that we can, kind of think, be sustainable going forward and not, and really change things up as things change. But I think it requires, I can't emphasize enough the planning and the collaborativeness that, that you need throughout that. So it's not just within the library, it's like within the town, within, you really want all of your support systems in place before you do any of this. And then if you can, I think hiring a consultant is really worth it, and it will save you money in the long run, especially for a big project, because a lot of these consultants have experience doing this, so they've done this before, and they know, and can help you, guide you through these decisions that have to be made. And it's a lot of money, so you don't want to be spending money, improperly, or, in a way that's just not going to make sense for the future.
Yes, and in our case in Franklin Lakes, we've been doing our renovations in phases. So we're currently in a phase where we're redoing our circulation desk area and our main area, but we had already done our meeting room and our gallery and our entrance. And a lot of the feedback we have received from the community was through our strategic planning. And our library hadn't really had any sort of major work done since 2001, 2-ish, and very little since. So for us, and for me in particular, it was really important to think of, again, looking towards the future and how libraries, yes, used to be used, but how they will be continue to be used moving forward. And I remember, because I came on sort of as the project was underway a bit, and the designers wanted our meeting room to have a carpet in it. And I fought back and I said, this is our only programming space. Have you ever tried painting with children and a carpet? Have you ever tried doing a food program with children and teens with a carpet? Like, I do not want a carpet in our meeting room. And that also, I think, opens the eyes to the trustees as well to be like, oh, wait, I think the room is being used in different ways than we originally considered and thought. And for me, having a lot of library experience was very helpful because I have been able to see how things have changed and again, try to continue to look forward and with a lot of input from my staff as well about what their needs and thoughts were. And, again, as my board president will say, we're now going to have a welcome desk instead of a goodbye desk because our circulation desk was in you couldn't really see the people at the desk or see where the desk was until after you already walked in the room and turned around. All of that really is in mind with looking forward to library services, not of, the 70s or 80s or whatnot, but of moving forward and the future. So
Well, Teaneck did not have any major renovations since 1980. So by the time when I started in 2022, the building was falling apart. It was like for 40 years, nothing got done to the building. So my goal was actually trying to bring up the building to the current standard, not really thinking about the future. But I agree with Sarah that I was really trying to have our rooms multifunctioning, have a flexibility. So I put some shelvings where I want to open up when I need the space. Everything is on wheels. I have two areas that I put shelvings on wheels. So if I want to create an open space there for events or something like that, I can move those shelvings. And it was funny, my architect was like, oh, because the shelving has wheels, it doesn't mean that you can easily move it. Actually, I tried it. I can move it. So it's not myself, but like, with help from other staff members. So, but what I want to say is I had a lot of unofficial, like a chat with the director kind of meetings with the residents and see what they want from the library. And I also kind of observe user patterns. We had our reference room had a quiet study tables, which did not work because my staff was constantly talking to the patrons to help them, and then we got shushed a lot. So we separated our quiet study area, put it in a separate room. So I think you have to kind of see how people are using the library, where you want to put certain sections, and then kind of that kind of sets how people use their libraries, so that it kind of you create a quiet area, you also create a little bit of noise area. I think you have to really see and understand how people are using the library.
And just to add on to that, I mean, we also had a lot of community input into what was in the space. And so, yeah, just to your point about quiet areas, I remember that was number one on people's list. They wanted meeting room space, quiet room space. And so we went from two quiet rooms at our old location, which had not been touched really since 1969, to we have 10 quiet and collaborative rooms that are constantly in use now, and people are very happy about that. But it's an ongoing process, and so we just started a strategic planning process now, so now we're getting community feedback again. We've been open since July, and to see what we're doing, how we're, have we done what the community asked for, and it's just an ongoing process, just getting input and seeing what people want us to be doing differently and how the spaces are working. So I think it doesn't end. And I've had to turn my camera off twice because I've got electricians here, I've got the security consultants here. So I'm doing punch list issues. I mean, this is a full-time job, which we don't have full-time for. But I just it does not end when the construction ends. I just want to make that pretty clear. But it's exciting.
Thank you for that. And just to follow up quickly on that with the community input, Shinae, you mentioned that as well. Are you putting out Google Forms? I mean, how are we receiving this input? Are you putting it out on in the library like a QR code? How are you getting input from, or is it just transactional at the circ desk? Like you have conversations with people. How are you getting that information?
I think your front desk staff will tell you. And my meetings were never like filling out the forms. It was very much a discussion, how they're using the library, what they want from the library. I did not, I mean, I don't think I had a time to even work on the strategic planning part of it. And if you have time to do that, it's kind of wonderful to include their opinions in some structured format, but I just did it unofficial. I had the multiple sessions, different times to see different people. And we also have our team volunteer group meetings. So we also got our students' opinions into our planning too.
Our architects held, I mean, probably like 15 community focus groups. So when they were in the conceptual design stage before we had the design, I mean, there was a big community meeting, and then there was the teen focus group, the seniors, the writers, the business people. I mean, it went on and on and on. And so, I mean, we got a lot of like formal input. And there was a survey as well. I mean, we kind of like we try to be as transparent as possible, and I think that helps you in the long run, and making sure everybody gets their voices heard.
Great, thank you. This you touched on a little bit, but how do you stay engaged with the community within that smaller space? So is it was that the answer that you are going and outreaching to them? Or I guess maybe that question also means when the community is in your space that's smaller or the adjusted location, like you made your, Elise, you made your programming room, your circ room. And how are you, I guess the question really would be, how are you making your public feel comfortable in that transitional stage where they're walking into something that is completely different? How are you keeping that positivity with the community? I guess that's the bigger question.
For us, because we had to use a different entrance for people to get into the building, we set up what we called a welcome desk. And we had a person who was directing traffic, so to speak, but directing people how to get to the elevator, because our staircase was closed, and how to find the children's room. And again, because they're coming into the building through a completely different perspective that most of them never have before and probably won't again, because it's technically an emergency exit. But that was it was an idea from my circ staff actually, and patrons really, really, really appreciated it. And I think that, went a long way in helping them feel more comfortable walking into the building again.
And I would just say that, again, people love our staff are very well loved in town. And so I think seeing, having this, even though the location was different and the services were different, and they really appreciated seeing the same staff, in these spaces. And then I remember having talked to, the Princeton Public Library when they closed. This was years ago, and were opened an interim space. I think it was in like a strip mall. I remember Leslie Berger telling me, she's like, people were really upset when they closed that interim space because people had gotten really used to it. And it was interesting because the same thing happened in Maplewood. We had this really cramped, old interim space, but it was on a different side of town. It was near our community pool, and it was accessible to people who actually needed our services and had Wi-Fi for the first time, and public computers. And I remember when we had the signs up saying that we were closing the interim space, and great news, we're going to have the grand opening for the new library, on July 5th. And we had a number of people saying, "What? You mean you're not going to keep this open and reopen?" And they were sad that we were closing it. So that was eye-opening for us too, just realizing there was a need that was not being met in a certain part of our town that we suddenly served. And that's been a conversation for us. How do we engage that, make sure that segment of the community, and Maplewood is not very big, it's three miles, kind of around. How do we make sure that segment of the community feels welcome back in our branch and our main library?
When we were operating in Maplewood, they were generous enough to provide us a shelving for our collection. We're buying some bestseller titles. So when people walk into the adult room, they were able to see, say, like Teaneck books. And then I asked my staff member to wear their name tags so that they can see who's from Teaneck. And I think at some point there were more Teaneck staff members than Maplewood staff members. So we were able to have a lot of in-person interaction with our patrons there.
Thank you. I definitely want to hit upon the questions that our registrants had asked ahead of time. And, you know, of course, they could just keep asking via the chat. Is there something that you regret doing or not doing? Sarah, you hinted to the overload of weeding on the way back in because your project was large. Is there anything else that you regret doing or not doing, any of you? That's a great question.
For me, okay, before starting this project, we're librarians. I didn't understand the rule of contract rules and everything, and I didn't know you have resolution passed for the project. I didn't know you can only go over 20% of that amount. So that's your contingency fund. And my architect highly recommended to put in another contingency fund in the budget, and I had a big argument with my purchasing agent that they don't allow extra funding in there. But I was afraid that I knew that my building had asbestos issues, and I was kind of afraid of how we're going to address this issue. So I'm kind of regretting not adding contingency fund in that contract budget. If I can do it again, I probably fight for harder to get that built in, because what happening was we had to replace the entire ceiling that we never planned. We had to replace the entire floor downstairs because it was asbestos tiles, and that ate up over $200,000 out of my my construction budget. And at the end of it, we already went over almost close to 20% of that change order amount. So I could not do anything else at the end. And I started hiring for extra work, other vendors to come in, which was very, very difficult.
Wow, thank you. Anyone else on that one? That was a big one. Thank you for that, Shinae. I'm sorry you went through that. That's rough.
Yeah, I guess to add to that, I think it's just that, yeah, all of this is not something that we were ever trained for. So that you really you need good advice going in here. And that's where when you have, like, I have a very good relationship with our town and with our mayor. Our mayor was came to every construction meeting with me, so there was always, like, there were no surprises. Like, and our building turned out to be a $24 million project, which was well over what we initially estimated it was going to be. But because I think there was the value, the town saw the value in it, was willing to, to kind of keep us on track and to help us with it. We had all sorts of unknown things, including the amount of asbestos removal within the building. It came to almost $1 million. So, like, things that were discovered during the construction process were huge. There was an underground tank that no one knew about, because this was from the 50s when the original building was built. That had to be remediated. That was another huge amount of money. So I think it's just knowing that there's going to be unknowns in this, especially a big building program. That's just part of the animal. And making sure you've got the support around you for when those unknowns happen to be able to deal with them.
Great, thanks. We touched upon for full-time staff, and I actually wanted to throw it in as a question before, but I knew that one of our attendees asked about it. What about part-time library assistants and part-time employees? We hit upon wanting to make sure that our full-time employees had a place to stay, whether they went to neighboring towns or whether they're working within your own facility. But what can part-time library assistants do that is worthwhile while the library is closed? Or were you faced with situations where you were not able to keep part-time employees?
we kept all our part-time staff members who wanted to move on to different jobs. They moved on. I did not fill that position, and several staff member retired because we were opening Sundays at New Milford. All my part-time staff member was part of that rotation, and they were also all working at the desk too.
Sarah and Elise,
Everybody as well. I mean, I think we have a probably maybe a different, just we're structured differently. So our hourly staff are not union staff member if they work below a certain hours. And so we just didn't have as much hourly opportunities. But our part-time staff were all on board and busy.
so you found things to keep them busy while the library was in a
Yes.
smaller situation.
Yep.
Okay.
We did as well for our staff. We kept the same staffing levels and found things for them to do, but we were closed for a much shorter time than
Right, but it's okay. I mean, that's what it's good to have this perspective of a smaller time versus a larger time. Because we don't, our attendees right now could be doing a super small renovation. They could just be working on a meeting room, they could be, getting knocked down. So all perspectives are great. Would you be able to give maybe perhaps because the question was, what could these part-time assistants do? So could you give me an example of the jobs that they were doing while you were closed, or some of you weren't fully closed, though you found spaces to go. So I guess the question is, I guess maybe you perhaps did answer it already, that you were going to a neighboring library working different hours. But if there are any more small specific examples you can give for this attendee that might help them.
We took an opportunity to do an inventory of our staff, like full on, check, with a Simply Reports list. Are the items that are saying on our shelves, or are they missing? And that's something that I think was a blessing, because we don't really, when do we ever have time to do like a full inventory and such like that? And, my staff were really shocked to see how many books were on our shelves that were not in our inventory, and vice versa, in our collection list. And that's something that any of the staff can do, but was great for part-time staff to do.
Great. Thank you. So this is an interesting question that I'm hoping you might be able to answer. So when setting up Wi-Fi, things to consider like walls or other things that may block signals. Who's in charge of that? How did you handle that? Was that the contractor? Was that Buckles? How did you handle that situation?
Well, for our project, we had an audio, a tech we had a firm, we had a construction, a company that did all of our technology, and we had to go out to bid for them. So they really worked closely with the architects to make sure when they were designing all of our systems that went in, that everything was going to work properly. And along with our head of technology here at Maplewood. So they all just a lot of communication just to make sure that was all working.
Our work did not change any of our Wi-Fi system. But this room where I'm sitting right now was open space before. I created a little office space for the staff members to sit in to do a video call or a meeting. I have no problem with our Wi-Fi, so I believe the wall is not really blocking the Wi-Fi signal. That's what I believe. But for other stuff, our security cameras and our phone systems, I worked with that was a part of different capital requests. So I worked with our town IT staff to get that. We used the state contractor for it, and then they ran the wires, and they got all that installed for us.
Thank you for that. This might be something that maybe we could follow up on, Matt. The next question is a big one, and it says, is there a list of vendors that would be best to use, and could this be created? So with those of you that are our panelists, if you maybe talk about one or two that you loved, but keep this answer maybe more concise, so that this way we could maybe get feedback from you and then create something that we can give back to the attendees. Matt, is that something that we could possibly do with this question?
I think it's possible to do. I mean, obviously it's a little tricky, like, oh, we're going to promote this particular vendor over another, that kind of thing. But also the state library, I believe, has a list of at least state contractors, which I've used for renovation purchases at my library too, including book movers too. Um, so I don't know if the panelists also used that list and that was helpful for them.
Yeah, that's what I was going to say is to the state is to use the state library list.
Okay.
And your architect is probably going to have recommendations for other vendors to use. Yeah.
Okay, gotcha. Shanae and Elise, anything on that?
Well, I have to say, if you go out for a public bidding, your contractor will use their subcontractors for flooring, plumbing and electrical work. So we don't really get involved with that one. So individual, like for the construction part of it, we don't have to look for different vendors for it. But after the construction, you have to fix something, this and that you probably, I use a lot of Berg and Co-op vendors or state contractors.
My guess, perhaps, and I don't know because it was a general question that was stated, is that maybe perhaps somebody that's on this chat right now is maybe not doing a huge reno per se, but maybe was looking for ideas of vendors for maybe some sort of facilities issues. I'm not quite sure. If there is if you're on here and you're anonymous or whatever the case is, if you do have any follow-up questions to that, let us know. But based on the way we're perceiving that, it's to use the state contractor, the state recommendations. Okay. Aside from a capital campaign, what are the smaller needs a library may need financial assistance with during a renovation that a foundation can assist with?
For us, our friends of the library pay for our window treatments, our landscaping outside the building, and then display screen inside the library, and then signage. So these are things I really was not thinking when I was planning the building renovations, but I think it was great to have some help from the friends.
And for us, our foundation, what they were specifically fundraising for our furniture, fixtures, and equipment, and our solar. So they raised more than $2.5 million to help us with this project. And because of that, for our, furniture is very expensive, especially for a building of our size. And because we went through the foundation, we used best practices. We went out, got requests for proposals, but we did not have to do the public bidding process for the furniture, which was huge. So they did, it's that includes our millwork, our furniture. You have to think, kind of if, because the public bidding process can be pretty, I mean, you get what you get in that, when you go out, and that's true of the main, the GC, the general contractor, getting the lowest responsible bidder. I mean, that was very challenging for us to work with that contractor who we worked with. But, that made it a lot easier to set those kind of things that are very visible, our shelving, our furniture, all of that, the foundation paid for. And we could treat that a little bit differently.
Good for your foundation. God bless. That's a lot of money. But these are really helpful things that, yeah, Shanae, I don't think I would have thought of some of that either. So really interesting how the Friends or a foundation can help in those ways.
And Shanae mentioning signage, I think that is something that people forget, but it's really, really important. And so we also had a signage, we had a signage designer, that's made a huge difference in our project. And that's both donor signage and collection signage and building signage.
Great, thank you. Our next question, Matt, I think I might need you to jump on this one because I don't know if I would have the right response to it, but can a database be created for the vendors with good recommendation, like the vendors for youth services program vendors, janitorial, landscaping, floor care, HVAC, plumbing, electrical, etc., or more specific ones like brick etching or library cards or barcode labels? So this is more a broad question that may not necessarily pertain to renovations, but I think it's still something great that maybe somehow I don't know if member services can follow up with something like that. And I know we held a facilities management virtual chat last year. This may have fallen under that a little bit, but can you answer that?
Uh, yeah, I mean, is it possible? Sure, but again, I think it falls into the same kind of category as the last question, where it's like, are we able to like actively promote certain vendors over another? That could be tricky. But I do think that the two categories there, the state contractor, the state libraries list is again a great resource. I always look for state contractors when possible. We did an HVAC renovation and it had to go out to bid. And like as everyone was saying, the bidding process, you can kind of get whatever you get. You do your best with your RFQ and your RFP. But at least for me, when our HVAC, we still had like 18 months of problems after it was installed. And I'm not qualified to write the RFQ in a way that's like to make sure that I get the best products, right? You're relying on your engineers and stuff. The other thing I would say for like, getting recommendations is if you're director, the director listserv is pretty helpful, for specific things. If you want to like, hey, do you guys have somebody in the area that you've worked with for painting, for whatever? You could definitely go and look there for a lot of recommendations, and I often do. Um, so can an actual database be created? Possibly, but I think the state library kind of already has one that's pretty good. Um, and then I think it would be kind of tricky as far as, actively promoting certain vendors. I can tell you ones I don't like. No, I'm kidding. I can't really do that
Okay.
either.
I feel like this one might be more of a local somebody in our chat right now that might be looking for like local vendors, somebody who's in one of our 4 counties that needs you know, smaller work projects done, smaller reno projects or facilities things. So the state contract may not be like, that might be on a bigger scale. Again, I'm just guessing based on the way the question is stated that this might be for somebody that's looking for something smaller. But Matt, maybe perhaps you and I can bring that up at a member services committee meeting and see if that's something that we could put together, like the programs for youth services. They have vendors there, so maybe we could pull something together. So if that's the case and we do get something together, we'll try and email any form to the attendees that are in this program, if we can do that. Because I don't want to ignore the question because it's great. And I think we'd all love to have a nice list of local people but again, we're in that, are we pushing our own people? Are we not? Are we promoting certain things? So we have to just get clarification on that. Okay. So that'll be a follow-up answer to the best of our ability for that one. And our final question that we had was, please suggest how to keep social media posts from getting boring and repetitive, but not cringe and trying too hard if possible. So I don't know if this is directly in regards to renovations, but if you guys can give us any of the suggestions on how you kept social media going while you were in your reno project, that would be great.
I think for our case, people loved seeing updates on the construction. So that was, and we have we have a terrific, social media coordinator here, one of our librarians who's, I think does a fantastic job. And she, would occasionally, not always, but like if we, once a month or something, put something out about what was happening at our building besides our programming and other things that were happening to keep people engaged. Because there was a big fence around our building. So people couldn't see, they were like, oh my God, they've been closed for 3 years. What is going on? It's like to keep things positive and to get people excited about the building. I think that was really, really helpful. And then when we started having sort of behind the scenes tours for some of our donors and stakeholders, then they helped us because they were putting stuff out, and that was very, very helpful to keep things positive over a long period of time.
The renovation progress posting is always a hit, and they're waiting for it. We were trying to upload something frequently, but we didn't want to spoil it at the end, so we stopped posting at the end of the renovation. But one time I remember April Fool's Day, my step member posted our reference reference room. She made it look like it became the tennis court or not the tennis. What's popular these days? Um,
Pickleball?
yeah,
Pickleball.
pickleball court. So she kind of created something that's like now your reference room is gonna be a pickleball court, and they got a lot of so you can make it funny, I think, engaging, but people love to see how the building is moving, the renovation updates. So that's how we got it them.
Elise, were you faced with anything similar to that?
Yes and no. I mean, we've had I have a great social media person who has been managing all of our renovation updates and giving sneak peeks. We are trying to keep it a little bit more under wraps for our ribbon cutting event. But I will say something that I would not have thought of is misinformation being passed around on social media. And we've had quite a few rumors and upset patrons with things that they thought were happening that actually were not. So trying to stay ahead of the communication and finding that right balance is very important. So,
The other thing we did was right before, like 2 months before we opened, because this was such a big endeavor, we hired a local PR company. So a Maplewood-based PR firm to help us. And that was probably the best decision we made because they can think in ways that, we have our usual channels about social media and how to get the word out. But that brought, I mean, and if I, in all my years of being a librarian, a library director, if I was thinking about the times that I should have done this and didn't, now that I know the effectiveness of it, that was huge.
Money well spent, in other words.
yes.
Okay, perfect. So those were our gist of questions ahead of time. Was fantastic in regards to having questions ahead of time, and you all nailed your answers in great perspectives on all scales of the project. We can't thank you enough for it. I don't see any other follow-up questions in the chat. For those that are attending right now, if you do have follow-up questions, let us know, and we can see if we can try and get answers for you. Ladies, I'm don't want to put you on the spot, but I'm guessing that you might be welcome to have questions if people have follow-ups for you. So we appreciate that very much. We appreciate all of you attending. We have about 30 people attending the program. So I'm hoping that this has helped out those that are going through the projects. I'd say for those of you that are going through a small project or a big one, hang in there. Based on what we're hearing here, it's a heck of an experience, but it's well worth it for our community in the long run. So thank you to our three panelists. Matt, thank you for co-hosting with me. And thank you to all of you that attended today's chat. We went over a little bit of time, but we hope it was worth your while. So thank you so much, everyone.
Thank you to our presenters, definitely. And thank you, Maria, for hosting.
No problem.
And I will stop our recording.